The prairie winds whispered sorrow across the wide-open land, where Samuel Carter, a cowboy hardened by years under the burning sun, stood over the fresh grave of his beloved wife, Mary. Life on the frontier was never easy, but Samuel had always carried its weight with unflinching resolve, never once backing down from hardship. Until fever struck the woman he loved most. It came like a thief in the night, stealing her warmth, her laughter, her strength, leaving Samuel with nothing but the echo of her voice in the silence of their homestead. The house felt hollow without her. The rocking chair by the fire no longer creaked. The smell of fresh bread no longer lingered in the kitchen, and the smile that once welcomed him home at dusk was forever gone. Samuel worked the ranch with grim determination, but inside, loneliness hollowed him out. He had a little boy, Thomas, barely 5, who clung to him with wide, frightened eyes. And though Samuel tried to be strong, there were nights when grief crushed him so heavily he wanted to surrender to the dust. Then one morning, a wagon rolled up the dirt road, wheels creaking against the stillness. And when Samuel stepped outside, he saw her, Clara, Mary's younger sister. She stepped down from the wagon with a firm grace, her blue dress catching the light, her golden braid brushing her shoulder as her eyes, so like Mary's, found Samuel's with quiet understanding. "I came as soon as I heard," she said softly, her voice steady, though her eyes brimmed with sorrow. Samuel swallowed hard, torn between gratitude and a pain that cut deep, because looking at Clara was like glimpsing Mary's shadow, and his heart twisted at the reminder. But Clara didn't come to stir ghosts, she came to help. At first her presence was both comfort and torment. She filled the kitchen with the smell of fresh bread again, hummed soft lullabies at night when Thomas cried, and her laughter sometimes startled Samuel, so much like Mary's that he'd close his eyes and let it wash over him, like a balm and a wound at once. Days stretched into weeks, and Samuel noticed the way Clara's hands, though delicate, worked tirelessly, mending clothes, tending the garden, hauling water without complaint. She was a woman forged from the same quiet steel as her sister, a woman who belonged on this land. And though Samuel fought against it, he began to see her not just as Mary's sister, but as Clara herself, a woman who carried her own light. One evening after a long day branding cattle, Samuel returned home to find Clara sitting on the porch, the sunset painting fire in her hair. She looked up at him, and something passed between them, a silent recognition of the bond, growing in the shadows of grief. But Samuel wrestled with guilt. How could he even think of another woman, especially Mary's sister? He carried the burden like a chain, keeping Clara at a distance even as life wove them closer. Clara, for her part, never pushed. She poured her care into Thomas, into the homestead, into Samuel's weary heart without asking for anything in return. Yet Samuel saw the strength in her eyes, the quiet devotion, and his soul ached with both longing and fear. The turning point came one stormy night when thunder shook the plains and Thomas, terrified, crawled into Clara's arms. Samuel stood in the doorway, watching her rock the boy against her chest, murmuring soothing words, her face calm in the flicker of lantern light. In that moment, Samuel saw not Mary's shadow, but Clara's truth, her courage, her love, her place in their lives. His heart broke open, and the walls of guilt began to crumble. Later, as the storm raged outside, Samuel found himself standing beside her, their shoulders brushing. "Clara," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I don't know if it's right, but I can't deny what's in my heart anymore." She looked at him with tear-filled eyes, her lips trembling. "Samuel, I've loved you longer than you'll ever know. Not in betrayal of my sister, but in honor of her. She would want you to live, not wither." Their hands found each other in the shadows, and for the first time since Mary's passing, Samuel felt the warmth of life rushing back into him. The townsfolk whispered when they heard of their union. Some judged, calling it improper for a man to marry his late wife's sister. But Samuel and Clara held their heads high, for theirs was not a love born of scandal, but of survival, of healing, of two souls bound by loss, yet drawn together by fate. Their wedding was simple, held under the wide sky, with only a handful of friends gathered. Thomas clutching Clara's hand as though sealing the bond himself. Samuel looked at his new bride not as Mary's sister, but as the woman who had given him back his will to live, and he vowed to cherish her with all the strength left in him. From that day forward, the homestead thrummed with life once more. Clara's laughter filled the air, Thomas grew strong with her care, and Samuel, though he never forgot Mary, carried her memory not as a chain, but as a gentle reminder of the love that had guided him to a new beginning. He learned that love does not replace what was lost, it builds upon it, shaping something new, something enduring. Years passed, and the ranch thrived under their hands. On quiet evenings, Samuel would sit on the porch with Clara beside him, Thomas playing in the yard, and he'd watch the sunset blaze across the horizon. Sometimes grief would still visit him, soft and bittersweet, but he no longer carried it alone. Clara was there, steadfast and radiant, the answer to a prayer he never dared to speak. He realized then that life had given him not just a second chance, but a deeper kind of love, one that grew from loss, resilience, and the courage to open his heart again. And as the wind whispered through the grass, Samuel knew he was exactly where he was meant to be, with the woman who had come not just to help, but to heal and to become his bride.